At the start of the movie, we see a girl walking through a tunnel. Her name is Margaret. She's drunk, with someone behind her. When she pulls out a cigarette, the man behind her hands her a lighter and offers to take her to a hotel. The scene ends there, and the story enters a flashback. Margaret tells us that sometimes she thinks some stories don't have happy endings. She works at a flight attendant school in Japan where she teaches girls the correct pronunciation. Last night, she got really drunk, and today she comes to school in the same clothes. One of her students really likes her and compliments her clothes. She arrives at school in the same outfit she wore at the club yesterday, which means she hasn't been home yet. She goes to the restroom to change clothes, but the boss of the place notices, asking her if she's okay. Margaret says, "Yes, I'm doing well." Margaret lives alone in a small apartment, and she goes to the bar every night with her friends and Liam. Tonight, she gets drunk, and she even asks them what would happen if she gets drunk. What happened if she gets drunk? They tell her, if you get drunk, you can't walk. When she goes to the bathroom, she sees a man and holding hands with him. After that, she goes back to the table and starts drinking again. In the evening, when she's alone with her friend Liam, Liam asks her, "Why don't you date me? You can go out with me." He gets close to her, but Margaret tells him, "I see you as my brother." On the road, she sees a gangster. His name is Kazu. Margaret says, Kazu is the most handsome man she's ever seen in her life. Kazu notices her too, and when the green light comes on, they go their separate ways. It's late at night, all her friends have gone home. But she doesn't go to her home. She gets drunk at another bar. In that bar, she sees another man, and the man sees her too. They exchange smiles. The guy takes her to a motel. They're about to hold hand, but Margaret asks him to hit her with a belt. She likes being hit during holding hands, but the man doesn't want to hit her at all. This is why she leaves the motel. That night, Margaret doesn't go home either. She goes to school in the skirt she wore last night. She's so drunk, she can barely walk. Her boss sees her and tells her, "I think you're not feeling well today. You should go home." Margaret goes to the bathroom and her boss follows her. She asks her, "Do you know why I gave you this job?" Margaret doesn't know. Then she tells her, "When I was young, I was like you. I enjoyed my life." But Margaret doesn't believe her, because now she's completely different. Her boss tells her, "I don't have my husband or any children. Everyone knows my life is awful. I might have made many mistakes in my life, but I can still teach these girls something." She tries to inspire Margaret. After going to the library, Margaret is looking at an album full of paintings. But suddenly, Kazu comes over and asks her, "Do you like this artist?" Margaret says yes, and Kazu also says me too. In the following scene, we see them going to a motel as Margaret wished. She wants to have intimate relations with him, and her hands and legs will be tied to the bed. Kazu does so. Kazu tells her not to think he's a bad guy. Margaret tells him, "No, I won't." The next day, when she goes to school, her boss asks her, "Do you think this is fun?" Margaret tells her, "Actually, I like my job." She plays the role of a stewardess. She tells them how a little girl gets along with terrorists. She plays their role. After school, she sees Kazu waiting for her. He tells her not to worry. They will go for dinner. He takes her to a Japanese restaurant. They have to take off their shoes to enter the restaurant. When Margaret takes off her shoes, we see her socks are torn. Kazu doesn't want her to feel uncomfortable, so he takes her to another restaurant. He asks her, "What are you doing in Japan?" Margaret tells him, "Actually, I want to live alone." She doesn't want to be away from people, but she wants to be away from her family and her country. They're talking to each other, but suddenly a man walks over there. He's drunk. He falls onto Margaret. Margaret feels very uncomfortable about this. Then she goes to the bathroom. When she comes back from the bathroom, she says the whole restaurant is quiet. Actually, Kazu is a gangster. That's why he drove everyone out of the restaurant. He tells Margaret, "Sometimes people will try to disturb you. That's why you need to stay away from them." After that, they go to the hotel and hold hands again. Margaret asks him, "What do you like about me?" Kazu tells her, "You are special. You're special. Your needs are not so easily fulfilled, so satisfying you is like a challenge for me." Then Kazu asks her what she likes about him. Margaret also tells him he likes to challenge her, and she likes challenges. Kazu tells her about his marriage. Margaret hears and is not happy. She leaves the hotel. In the next scene, we see Margaret telling her friends, "One day I will lose consciousness and go crazy," but her friend asks her if this is about Kazu. There's no difference between love and madness. Margaret tells her that he's getting married. Her friend is also a little upset. She tells her, "Life is a journey. Enjoy this journey." To cheer her up, she takes her to a bar. Afterwards, we see her reading a book. The very book she saw when she met Kazu in the library. Kazu gave the book to Margaret. Margaret sees a hotel card in the book, so she goes to that hotel and encounters him. They hold hands again. Margaret finds it interesting that Kazu is a gangster. Margaret asks him, "Have you ever cut off someone's finger as a gift?" Kazu tells her. If someone makes a mistake, he wants them to remember it for life. Then he will cut off their fingers. He doesn't want to talk about this with her, so he asks about her family. Her parents have passed away. She has a brother. She starts hearing so many voices in her mind that no one can guide her in her life. She asks him, "Do you love your wife?" Kazu tells her, "You have to take some responsibilities in your life. You can never live your life alone." Marriage. Society is so important. That's why he has to get married. Then they hold hand again. Kazu asks her why she wants to play this game in bed. Margaret tells him it's something that excites her. In the following scene, we see Margaret and her friend Liam eating candy together. Liam's girlfriend comes. They look cute together. Margaret teases them for it. The next day, when she comes to school, Kazu stands outside. He asks her to go somewhere with him. Because Margaret has to go to school, she can't go with him. She tells him, "If you want, we can go out tomorrow." But Kazu insists, so she agrees. Some of her students see this. They travel by train. Kazu shows her some of his childhood photos, and Margaret is overjoyed. Later, Kazu takes her to the original place, and then they kiss each other. Then they arrive in front of a pagoda. Inside the pagoda there is a sign, Kazu tells her. "If you come here, she will have a new life. From now on, you will have no connection with your past life." After coming out of the pagoda, Kazu asks her how she feels. Actually, Margaret doesn't feel anything special, so Kazu tells her you will feel it in the future. Margaret falls asleep on the train, and then Kazu leaves after draping his jacket over her. Because we see Margaret did not come to school yesterday, so her boss is very angry and fires her. Margaret tells her that she can be a good person, but her boss tells her if you want to be a waitress, go elsewhere. After leaving school, she cries very hard. Kazu does not contact her. One day, her friend comes to find her, telling her she is going back to America. Margaret tells her, "The good things in our lives will not stay with us for long. They will leave us." For the last time, they go to a bar. Margaret asks her friend, "Why do you choose me as your friend?" She tells her, "There are two kinds of people on this earth. The first is those who easily realize their wishes. The second is those who take away their favorite things from people like hunters. At first glance, I think you are of the second kind." That night, Margaret holds hands with many men. The next day, when she walks on the road, she finds Kazu. He is with his whole family. His wife is there too. When his family leaves, Margaret begins to follow him. Kazu enters a building, but Margaret can't find him, so she sits there and cries for a long time. Kazu watches all this in his room. Then he comes to her. He tells her to keep away from him. He is not worthy of her, Margaret tells him. Maybe she can be a secret. In fact, Margaret only wants to hold hands with Kazu. They embrace each other. Margaret tells him, "I love you." Then they hold hands. Kazu feels good about this, but he feels sorry for what he has done today. Margaret wants to stay in Japan, but she has no job, which is why she starts working in a bar. On the first day, she realizes that this job is not for her, because she gets drunk that night. When leaving the bar, she cries on the road. Liam's girlfriend sees her, takes her to a restaurant. Margaret tells her, "Sometimes I want to be alone." She gets drunk that night too. She sees a poster on the wall. Girls are being kidnapped from the city. At the beginning of the movie, we see a man lighting a cigarette for her. She asks the man to take her to the hotel. Her behavior is too strange. She asks him to tie her to the bed. He ties her to the bed, asks her, "How do you feel?" "You are special because of your behavior." Margaret says it's not like that. "Actually, I like this kind of hotel." He tells her, "I used to come to this hotel with a girl when I was a child." Margaret tells him, "Sometimes people hide another face behind their true face." Margaret realizes that this might be her last night on Earth. She sees that sign from the pagoda. She feels she is getting a new life. Just as he is about to kill her, Kazu appears and saves her life. She can't believe it's him. She can't believe it's him. She asks him if he's following her. In fact, Kazu is in love with her. That's why he tracks her. Margaret is getting a new life. This is why she decides to start a new life. She wants to change her way of life. That's why she goes back to the US. On her way back, she calls Kazu, telling him, "You're right. I got a new life after I saw the sign from the pagoda." During the flight, she sees her student who is now a flight attendant. She feels very proud of her important job. The dialogue she said at the beginning of the movie, she says it again, but she adds a bit more. She says there are no happy endings in life. Things always happen in our lives. It's too messy. People create a story from different events in their lives, but it doesn't matter at all. If we notice it, it looks beautiful. If we seek beauty, we can find beauty in every aspect of life. Margaret has lost everything in her life. She falls in love with Kazu, but she can't have him. After coming back to life, she wants to live in a new way. When she sees her student on the plane, she feels very proud. Just like her boss told her, "I've made many mistakes in my life, but I can teach these girls from my mistakes. Margaret will do this in the future. No matter what happens in her life, she will find beauty in it. This is the positive message of this movie. If you enjoy this video, please give us a like and subscribe our channel. See you in the next video.